Good evening. We're back again on Thursday evening at 6 p.m. with the Wiley Resource Center Legal Support Program. As we promised you on last Thursday, right before the 4th of July, we would be back with some of our friends, and we're very excited because we're back tonight with Patricia Fron from the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. So before we jump into introductions with the Lawyers Committee, we want to remind you I'm Attorney Melissa Williams. I am with the Wiley Resource Center, which is a legal support program that is free to the community. We're usually meeting once a month on the third Saturday of every month, so we want to make sure that you have our contact information. Our hours of operation are listed for 2014, so the next time that we will be meeting will be Saturday, July the 19th, and we will be meeting at 12:30 p.m. If you're interested, you have some type of legal issue that you want to have a consultation about, then you want to make sure that you give us a call. The phone number at the Wiley Resource Center is 773-738-1480. There is a website as well. That's www.wrc, as in Wiley Resource Center, .vpweb.com. If you give us a call, our information line tells you all about where we'll be meeting at. It gives you the dates, the times, and all of that good information as well. So we want to remind you that tonight's show is a live call-in show. And we have a very live topic tonight because we are going to be talking to the tenants that we have in the Chicagoland area. Again, as I mentioned to you before, we are being joined tonight by Patricia Fron from the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. So I'm going to be quiet and let her introduce herself to you all.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Again, my name is Patricia Fron. I'm with the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. I'm not an attorney, just to put that out front there.
Okay, good disclaimer.
But the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing is a nonprofit legal aid organization. We work with low and moderate income renters, primarily in Chicago. We do have limited services throughout the state of Illinois. And then the services that we offer are eviction defense services. We assist tenants who are having issues with building conditions, problems. We also assist tenants who are living in foreclosed buildings, which is the program that I work in. So within those components of our organization, we provide litigation services, advocacy services, education, and this is all throughout the city of Chicago.
And we're very excited about the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. I can guarantee that they are the real deal. We wouldn't bring any friends on the show who are not the real deal. Another thing that I want to mention, the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing is very near and dear to my heart. When I first finished law school back in 2003, that was the first job that I had in 2004 to 2005, working at the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. And what Patricia is saying as far as the services that are provided, they are very much real. So if you're out there and you're living in situations where you have rodents in your unit, if there are issues of lead in your unit, or just conditions that are not quite right, you definitely want to make sure that you reach out to the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. They, Monday through Friday are defending tenants in court. They have volunteer attorneys that are on board to assist as well. So we are really encouraging you, utilize the resources that we have here in Chicago, and we are very fortunate to have a number of resources. So I'm going to throw their information up on the screen just to make sure that you are able to connect with the folks at the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing if you need them. Again, if you're having conditions, if you're facing eviction, and then tonight, as we're going to be talking about the tenants that are living in foreclosed properties, what your rights are. Patricia works in that particular area of the Lawyers Committee, and we're going to be talking about some new laws in the Chicago area related to that as well. So, Patricia, let's get back to this. Let's talk about this a little bit. You've told us what the Lawyers Committee is, what the Lawyers Committee does. What are a couple of tips that you would give to tenants in the Chicago area, things that they really need to think about as they're moving into a property or as they're living there or as they're moving out?
I think just some basic tips that apply to all renters would be to, first of all, educate yourself on what your rights are as a renter. It's really important to understand the landscape that you're getting into, whether this is your first apartment or your 10th apartment. Just knowing what are your baseline rights and what are your baseline responsibilities. On top of that, document everything. If you have a lease, get a copy of that lease. Make sure you have multiple copies of your lease, even better. And when you pay your rent, it's best to have documentation of that, so not paying in cash, because that could get you into trouble as well.
And in my day job, I work at the University of Illinois at Chicago at UIC in Student Legal Services, and we see a lot of the same things that happen with our students that happen with tenants throughout the city of Chicago. We always refer to the baseline information that's given from the Lawyers Committee's website that kind of gives a layman's term explanation of the Chicago Residential Landlord Tenant Ordinance. And we have maybe even the strongest ordinance in the country to protect tenants and their rights. So you really need to take a look at this information and utilize it for your purposes.
Right, definitely. And you're selling our services better than I am. But yes, we do have that information.
Near and dear to my heart.
We do have that information on our website, lcbh.org. We have information on the Residential Landlord Tenant Ordinance and some of the newer ordinances that have come out in recent years that also impact renters.
And so we're encouraging you, and we're going to make sure we show you their information once again. Make sure if you're having some type of issue with your landlord and you're looking for a lawyer and you don't have the resources to pay an attorney, make sure that you try to consult the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. Their phone number is up here. Utilize the resources that are out there for you. One of the things that we always tell our students at UIC, when you're going to move into a unit, make sure that you take pictures of the condition of that unit. And when you're moving out of a unit, make sure that you take pictures when you move out as well. You have a right to try to go after your security deposit. Landlords don't have a right to just keep that just because. So make sure that you have the evidence that's needed to protect you. So let's go ahead and let's jump into what we came here for tonight. This is something that people around the city of Chicago need to be made aware of. And so, Patricia, tell us a little bit about the protection for the tenants that are living in foreclosed rental properties.
Okay, I would be happy to. I'm going to step back just a little bit. So I work in our Tenants in Foreclosure Intervention Project, which was started in 2008 because of the massive amount of calls we were getting from tenants who were being displaced from their housing because of foreclosure. So it wasn't necessarily that they stopped paying rents or an issue that they had control over. It was simply because of foreclosure that they were being vacated from their property. And we joined up with a coalition called the Keep Chicago Renting Coalition of groups throughout the city that were seeing the same types of problems that we were seeing. So violations of tenants' rights, rampant accumulation of vacant properties across the city, contributing to crime because of foreclosure. So we really saw this need and realized we needed a policy level solution to this issue.
Absolutely.
So that's how this ordinance came about. And it's the Protecting Tenants in Foreclosed Rental Property Ordinance. Okay. And it's more commonly known as the Keep Chicago Renting Ordinance. It went into effect September 24th of 2013. So it is a brand new ordinance. And it provides protections for renters. So there's layers of protection. So all renters have the right to get a new notice, which notifies them that the property has changed hands, who's now responsible for the property, and giving contact information for the new owner. So this is after the foreclosure sale has already occurred, the confirmation of sale has already occurred, and there's a new owner, which most of the time is going to be a bank.
Okay.
The main enhanced protections are for what's called qualified tenants. Mm-hmm. And a qualified tenant is a person who has a bona fide rental agreement, which means a rental agreement that was not with the, you can't be the child, spouse, or parent of the former owner.
Okay.
It has to be the result of an arm's length transaction, meaning it's two parties, a landlord and a tenant, both acting in their own best self-interest. And then the third component is that the rent paid under the ordinance, under the lease, cannot be substantially below fair market rent.
Okay.
So if you meet those three criteria, it doesn't matter if you have an oral lease, a written lease, a month-to-month lease, a year lease. If you meet those three criteria, you're a qualified tenant, and we believe that most tenants across Chicago are. Once the new owner takes possession of the property through foreclosure, they have to first notify you and then either renew or extend whatever rental agreement was in place at the time that they took ownership. They can't increase the rent by more than 2%, for instance. Or if they say, I don't want to continue renting to you until the property is sold to a third party, I want to vacate the property, they have to provide each unit with $10,600 in relocation assistance.
That is the information that people need to hear about. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to come back to that piece. The notice that's out there about who you need to be paying your rent to, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about that $10,000 because people have been getting gypped in our communities, and we're so glad that you all worked so hard to get this ordinance passed into law to make sure that this does not continue. They've been getting gypped and they've been getting displaced. We have a caller, so we're going to take a pause right there, and we want to talk to our caller right quick. Caller, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm calling. This it doesn't have to do with the foreclosed properties or anything, but I've got a situation. I'm in a senior building. I'm 62 years old. I just moved into it about 5 months ago, and I was qualified due to my income to pay 30% of my income for my rent. Okay, I'm 62, but my fiance is 44. We plan to get married. Now, the building itself says, well, they want seniors 62 and up, but the lease doesn't say anything about age. Now, if we got married, would I have to vacate the building, or would I be considered breaking the lease or anything if we, if she moved in with me and we, lived as husband and wife? How would that work?
One of the things that I'm thinking, when you moved in, did they give you any type of pamphlet or any type of rules and regulations in addition to the lease?
Yes, they did. They gave me, a pamphlet about what not to do, certain things that they didn't want, like no smoking in your rooms, and, and the pamphlet told about, your garbage, where you take the garbage and whatnot, but it doesn't say anything about age in any of the pamphlets or on the lease. When I signed the lease, they just told me that everybody in the building should be 62 and up. Okay, well, I had to explain to them that I was engaged, but we hadn't gotten married, hadn't set a date, and in fact, at that time, she was out of town. Well, she's come back into town, and we plan to get married soon, within the next, let's say, 2 to 3 months. Now, I just had this lease. I've only been on the lease for approximately 5 months.
But you did explain that to them when you first moved in?
I did explain to them that I did have a fiance.
Okay, and you did explain to them the age of your fiance?
Yes, I did.
And they, at the time, they didn't mention that would be a problem?
They said that they just wanted everybody 62 and up.
Okay.
I didn't know how long my fiance would be out of town because she was down with her children, so I didn't really know. I mean, the reason I took the lease, it was because of the 30% of my income. At that, it was a good deal.
Understandable.
And so I thought, well, okay, I'll take it. She'd probably be down there maybe a year because there were some other problems she was having with her daughter and whatnot. So I thought maybe she'd stay there, if not a year, close to it. Well, she's recently come back, and now we're talking about getting married.
Well, this is the suggestion that I have. I don't know about you, Pat.
I'll let you handle it. You're the attorney.
I would suggest that you call over to the office at the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. Mm-hmm. Let them know more about the situation that you just described for us on this evening.
Yes.
And a couple of things usually happen when you're working with an agency like the Lawyers Committee, and I can testify to this. If that's not something that they're going to handle, they're going to refer you to an agency in the city that does handle situations like that.
But, I do have a question. I can understand if they didn't want to renew my lease. I could understand it because I guess I don't fall in with their 62 and up thing. I can understand that. But what I don't want to do is break the lease and be held responsible for the rest of the lease.
And so that's why we're saying we want you to be able to speak with an attorney.
Okay.
Either at the lawyers committee, and again, if they're not going to be able to handle it, because there may also be some fair housing issues that are involved here as well when we're talking about age requirements and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. So there may be some other resources that would be available to you, some other programs that are kind of out there that deal with fair housing as well.
Okay.
So sir, excuse me.
Now?
So let me do this. Let me give you the number again.
That's 312-347-7600.
7600. And then what you'll do, you'll go ahead, give them a call on tomorrow, and then let's see what it is that they come up with that they suggest that you do. Okay. So let's do that way. And then we've got one more caller, and we're going to jump back in and continue talking about this ordinance.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you for giving us a call. We appreciate you.
All right.
Okay, Patricia. So this is what we're going to do. We've talked about the first requirement, dealing with the notice when there's a new owner that's taking over this foreclosed property. And then we're talking about this $10,000 piece. How does that work?
Okay, so that's a very obviously important piece of this ordinance, but it's not very simple and straightforward.
Okay.
So when we got cut off right at that point, I was like, oh, there's so much more we need to talk about. So for instance, I think it's really important to talk about when does the owner not have to pay that $10,600. So just because you're qualified doesn't mean outright $10,600. This choice of either continuing to rent or providing the $10,600 in relocation assistance, that's the option of the owner, not the tenant. So if the owner comes to a renter and offers a lease that looks similar to the old lease, a renewed lease, and it's not above 2% of an increase of the rent that was being paid before, and the tenant turns that rental agreement down, say, I don't want to continue rent here. This $10,600 looks way better to me. They're not eligible for the $10,600. It's either or, and it's the choice of the new owner. It's not the choice of the tenant, unfortunately. Also, all the same rights and responsibilities for tenants are in place. So if a tenant fails to pay rent or breaches their lease, and the landlord, the new owner, takes them to eviction court and they're evicted because of whatever breach of the lease, they no longer have the right to the $10,600 either.
Okay.
So I think those are really key pieces of information for the tenant to understand, that it's not a blanket, that you're going to get the relocation assistance, because I think there is that misconception out there.
The other thing that we've heard a lot from people, even some of my students at UIC, ask, if I'm in a foreclosure situation, do I need to continue to pay my rent?
Right, yeah. There's not just the confusion after, it's the confusion during the whole long foreclosure process, which on average now in Illinois takes anywhere from 1 to 3 years to complete. So during that very lengthy process, all the same rights and responsibilities apply for a tenant. So they should definitely continue to pay rent to the owner, because failing to do so is really risking their tenancy right there, because the landlord can still file an eviction.
So you want to make sure that your hands are clean. That's what they like to teach us in law school.
Right.
So you got to make sure that you're covering, as a tenant, all of your bases. Right. You're following the terms of the lease. You're paying your rent in order to be that actual bona fide tenant that is even eligible to make this this determination, hey, I want to stay here, and remember the other thing that Patricia mentioned to us, which is very important: if the new owner is coming to you and they want to raise the amount of that rent, as long as it's not more than 2%, again, that's not putting you in the situation where you have to move or you're entitled to that $10,000. So there are going to be certain specific rules that need to be followed.
Right. And just really quickly, if there's already a lease in place, that lease needs to be honored until
it expires.
It expires. Okay. So there can't be any kind of rent increase until the lease expires. And then upon the renewal or extension of that lease, that's when the rent increase can come into play. But again, it's capped at 2%.
Okay. So we're getting these terms out. We've got another caller. So we'll pause for a second and we'll hear from our next caller. Caller, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
What's your question?
My question is, I started off listening to the show, and the beginning of the show, I heard you all mention that you all are for the tenants' rights. And
the
my
Lawyers Committee
question
for Better
was,
Housing. Mm-hmm.
As a landlord, do you all also let the tenants know when they're wrong? Because I've had experience, and I'm just going to give you a little quick story. I've had experiences where we have had tenants in our building that was paying very little money up under Section 8, okay, and was going out of their way to not pay as little as $4 a month. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so they would complain constantly to Section 8 just to get out of paying anything because they were so used to not paying anything.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, defrauding Section 8 and whatnot, you know, and it was as if we were the ones that were doing wrong when we wasn't. You know, so I want to know when you all are saying that you're for the tenants, because a lot of tenants come into buildings and they make it so that you don't want to rent out to people with Section 8, no other type of thing that has to do with the government, because then the landlords are not protected. Nobody looks at the fact that if that tenant comes in and does not pay rent and complain to the point where the landlord does not get that rent, do anybody ever stop to think that that landlord and their family could be put on the streets because they have no good tenants that's being protected by people that don't, a lot of times, are doing the wrong thing, and you're doing it for the wrong people?
And we understand completely what you're saying. There's another project that we're working on. We're not going to be able to go into depth about it on this evening. There will be another organization that is coming in that is a partner in what we're working on. And it's dealing with that whole balance of the relationship between the landlords and the tenants. And looking at the landlords, including the mom and pop landlords that are out there, getting to know what the residential landlord tenant ordinance says. What are their rights and their responsibilities as well? What other ordinances are out there? For instance, the new bed bug ordinance that's requiring landlords to do certain things. The new state law that is requiring landlords to change the locks between their tenants. So we want to make sure that landlords know not only what your responsibilities are, but also what your rights are as well. And so in another show, a few weeks later from now, we're going to make sure that we talk about that as well. Okay. So make sure keep tuning. Yep.
Because I'm going to continue to listen to you all, because you're saying some interesting stuff.
Oh yeah, we want to make sure that people are aware of their rights and of their responsibilities. So we really appreciate your call too, and we understand. We do understand.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for calling.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, let's do this. We do have one more caller, but I want to give Patricia a chance to get a little bit more in about this ordinance. Did you have anything else that you wanted to make sure that folks knew about the ordinance?
I suppose just in closing, I think it's important to understand where your building's at, if your building's in foreclosure, and where it's at in the foreclosure process, because different rights are going to apply depending on where the building's at. And this is all public record information. You can look your building up online to determine if it's in foreclosure, where it's at in the process. We also assist with doing that at our office. So you could either go on our website, lcbh.org, and we have a rundown of how to look up a property to determine if it's in foreclosure, and it also spells out your rights, or you can give us a call and we can walk you through that process and let you know, is the building in foreclosure, where it's at, and that's how you'll know what rights exactly apply to your unique situation depending on where the building's at in the foreclosure process.
And that's very important information, and we really appreciate the fact that LCBH is helping tenants to figure out, you know, I'm in foreclosure, what do I do? Because that really is a situation that can kind of freak people out.
Yeah, because it doesn't mean, you know, you have to go right away. That's kind of what we're trying to avoid, is that panic mode. I gotta leave. What we're really trying to bring about some kind of sense of stability. That's why this ordinance was put into effect. It stabilizes not only housing, but it also stabilizes households. And
communities.
Yes, and communities as well.
So we've got another caller. Only a couple of seconds. Caller. Can we hear from you?
Yes, I'm going to try to make this real quick. To piggyback on what the other young lady is saying, some of us landlords not bad. I mean, some of us is really good people. We try to help people, but you got good tenants, you got bad landlords. You got to figure that mess out real quick. Quick question.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're coming out with the medical marijuana. You know, you got tenants that in the buildings, they're at least the ones I have. And the majority of them don't want to smell that. And we was trying to figure away, a couple of friends of ours, and they have a building. They do it over there in Rogers Park when they sign the lease. Mm-hmm. No reefer smoking in the building. They don't allow no cigarette smoking in the building. They have a thing where they go outside and sit in the yard, but I don't know how that will work. But we like to put it in our lease because we like to help other people. So anyway, real quick.
I hate to cut you off, but they're about to cut us off. So this is what I want to do. I want to tell you this. The state's attorney's office from Cook County is going to be one of our guests on one night, and we're going to be talking about that medical marijuana law. And we'll talk more about how that can apply. So